I've heard a lot about him. I think originally from Suzanne Pittsum.
Yeah, that's right. Suzanne
Yeah.
Pitson is very fond of him. Okay, I'm pretty sure we're live. Let's see. Let's see. Are we live yet? Yes, we are.
Uh-oh.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just kind of setting up here, but how are you all today? I'm good. I'm just looking for myself here. Okay, first thing I want to say, which I'm going to say a lot, is happy birthday, Dan Davila. I just want to, say happy birthday to Dan because Dan is one of our favorites here. And let's see, here we go. Okay, I think I'm together, Janice.
Hello.
Hello. Ladies and gentlemen, Janice Borla from from Chicago. You know, guess what I wore? I just happened to pull out the t-shirt yesterday of the jazz camp, and I almost wore it again today. I just thought this was like a little sexier than the t-shirt, so.
Well, it was a camp after all.
I know.
We were just about to segue to hats when
Oh,
when we decided, you know what, let's just retire and do something else.
oh. That's funny.
Because frankly, I have a closet full of t-shirts in 25 years times 3 sizes or 4 sizes. So, just I remember having loads of them and finally giving them to Goodwill because I didn't know what else to do with them. So I'm picturing all these, if you will, homeless people wearing these t-shirts of the local jazz camp.
It could be a thing. Maybe you could utilize it.
Oh, really? And Brad Sturtz, every time we do a concert at the college, Brad, of course, did the camp with us. And he wears the last year's t-shirt every time, bless his heart. It warms my cockles. He wears it more than I do, for sure.
So let's see. We should probably, we're definitely talking about the camp, but ladies and gentlemen, this is Janice Borla. She's kind of like me in Chicago. She's a vocalist, teacher, a community builder. She creates things. She had a jazz camp for how many years?
Well, 26 actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Long.
26 years. Can you imagine?
Isn't that wild?
It's like having a child,
Yeah.
seeing them to adulthood.
Yeah. I was there with Judy Niemak and Dan Hurley.
Uh-huh.
That was really fun.
You
Was
were
that
there
twice?
in 2007 and 2009, and I wanted to say that you were there with Judy the first time, and then maybe Jay.
Oh, Jay. Yeah, I was definitely there with Jay.
Mhm.
Jay Clayton.
Do you want to talk more about the camp, or should we go somewhere else? What do you want to?
Yeah, let's talk about the camp
Okay.
since we're there.
Well, and I'll maybe just back up by saying, at that point in my life, this has been like the early mid '80s. I had been working as a vocalist in Chicago for some while, but I actually, maybe the thing to say is that Jack and I met. Jack Mouse is my husband, and he's an amazing drummer, jazz drummer. And we met up in 1984, and at the time I met him, I was singing a lot in town. I was doing, I always call it my glamour days, because I was working a lot of really, beautiful soirees, and I was working a lot for the Playboy clubs, which were in their last days, but because Playboy was so user-friendly to jazz, it was actually a wonderful place to be for a few years, if you could get around the bunnies. and of course, in those days, with the early days of feminism, it was always a mind-blowing thing for me to be wandering around at the Playboy Club going, "What? But the fact was, I had a wonderful time as an artist. They treated me wonderfully. And I was able to not only work in their showroom in Lake Geneva and Chicago, but they flew me out to Atlantic City and Lake Geneva, opened up for various comics. You remember in those days, there was
That
this
was a
whole
great gig,
generation
right?
of comics, and they always wanted a singer to open the show. So I had, big band charts and gowns and the whole bunch.
Oh man, yeah.
So, in this environment, and by the way, I was working a full-time gig. I was working for Coldwell Banker 5 days a week, for like 7 years. And in my life comes Jack. And, we met professionally, we met on the gig. It took a minute to connect, but once we did, we really resonated. And, he started talking to me about, well, you should be singing jazz. And I'm like, well, gee, gee. Oh, yeah. And the more we talked about what that involved, the more excited I got. I had very solid musical training, but and I grew up at a time in the U.S. when our music, in all regards, was informed by jazz. Meaning, if you think about how pop music sounded in the 50s and 60s, 70s, if you will, swing music, jazz, sensibility was everywhere. So you didn't have to look very far to just kind of absorb it,
Yeah, yeah.
But I never consciously thought about it as a genre that I was pursuing, until Jack came along. And long story short, we began to get involved with things immediately. I mean, within a year, I recorded my first album. We released it on Seabreeze. We toured on it. We had great fun, putting together the group. At the same time, we had an opportunity to be involved in building a jazz studies program from the ground up. And this was at a liberal arts college here in the western suburbs, Illinois Benedictine College, which is now Benedictine University. And so, it never occurred to me I wasn't planning to teach. I was just wanting to, professionally be a singer. And suddenly this was presented as an opportunity, and kind of ran with it. And it changed my life. It really did, for many reasons. But I think the one for sure, well, first of all, just the idea of teaching became very exciting for me. I realized how much I loved it. How much articulating or trying to figure out how I do articulating what it is I do helped me to organize my thoughts about who I am, what I want to do, and how I'm going to do it. And also, just frankly, the joy of working with students in their happy place. I mean, who doesn't like music lessons? You know what I mean? I mean, especially in an academic environment. Oh boy, let me have my voice lesson versus, my biology class or my poli-sci class or whatever. Well, anyway, so my point being that a couple years into this, we needed a jazz studies course. And so the department chair said, Janice, you have a degree in musicology. We'll go to that later. How about you do the jazz studies course? And I'm never one to
Back off.
Yeah. Okay, sure. And so now, I've only been thinking about jazz for about 9 months at this point, maybe a year, And so I set about doing that, and I had to teach myself. I had to build a course teaching myself about jazz. And I mean, I really dug in there. And it was life-changing for me because I realized immediately, oh my gosh, this is an instrumental genre. The improvisation piece is essential. And I also realized that it was driven by the innovators were all instrumentalists. So somehow, how do the vocalists fit in? Well, to be honest with you, they weren't particularly important. They were pretty peripheral. Now, and not to say that Billy or Ella or Sarah or Carmen didn't make huge contributions, Louis Armstrong, so forth and so on, early on in the genre. But it was also apparent to me that, it was sort of a subset of jazz. So I, on the one hand, really started veering more toward instrumental music. It turns out that I became more interested first in the jazz standards that had lyrics. So I'm singing Equinox and what else? Beauty and the Beast.
That's
And
so interesting that
blah, blah,
that's
blah, blah,
why,
you know.
yeah, that's why you got
Yes,
into
and I
that.
came fully equipped with the vocal standards bag, but now I wanted to add to the the
Yeah, yeah,
instrumental standards.
right.
And as I got, further as days or as years went on, I got further into that and started looking at more contemporary writers. So now I'm looking at stuff by DeJohnette and Wayne Shorter and John Schofield and Joe Lovano, and and these didn't have lyrics, and
Yeah.
so it was a matter of, well, okay, so what? Because I kept thinking to myself, well, an instrumentalist. Well, I won't go there. Let me try another way to say it. I lost my train.
Were you going to insult the singers or?
No, 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 not at all. Simply saying that it was just my personal journey. I was just that was what my bliss was, or what really excited me was those kinds of tunes. And
Yeah.
the challenge of singing them, because, to be honest with you, vocal standards, because of their age, because of the age in which they were created, if you want to talk about the classic American songbook, were it was driven by formulaic harmonic material, meaning 2-5-1s drove
Yeah.
the boat. And once you get the hang of those, you get the hang of those. So again, coming into this music, that to me was easy peasy. I could hear standard changes easily. But boy, I mean, and believe me, the first jazz tune I decided to tackle was, of all things, Very Early by Bill Evans. Now, this is a classic case of, like, clueless. In other words, completely dumb about it. So I think, okay, I'm going to tackle this tune, and it took me about 3 years to be able to improvise over it. I mean, because at the time, by the way, I didn't mention this, I hadn't been improvising right away, and I kind of got into that slowly. And so I'm at a point in my life where I'm improvising over formulaic changes, and then I decided to hit the ground running with Very Early. Well, once I got through that and mastered it, if you want to call it that, then that was like a big benchmark for me. And after that, everything sort of opened up. But it also required me to do a lot of self-study. Because much as I brought to the table at the beginning of this journey about, music knowledge and theory and musicianship and blah, 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 I played piano and whatever, I hadn't had any kind of jazz harmony background. My education did not include jazz at all as an undergrad or as a graduate student. So I had to do all of that, or as much as I could, supplementary. I remember buying Mark Levine's book and then kind of going cross-eyed thinking, I'll never get through this.
I remember I did the same thing. I was so excited to get that book, and then what was
I think I'm on page 47. I think that was from 4 years ago. Because there's so much information, But on the other hand, there's some funny stories about that. But anyway, that's a whole nother conversation. So I'm trying to get back to the vocal jazz camp. Okay. So in the mid 80s, I got involved, meanwhile, with a camp up in Canada, of all places in Saskatchewan. But at that time, the political deal there was very liberal, and they had a wonderful summer arts camp for all different kinds of, all different sorts of disciplines, all summer long in this beautiful location in the middle of Saskatchewan called Fort Capel. Lake, hills, hills, beautiful, beautiful. And I was called on to add a vocal component to an instrumental camp. So they gave me, 12 singers and a piano player and a room, and go knock yourself out and we'll see you on Friday. And that went well, we got through it, blah, 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 blah. And by the way, it was a wonderful thing because I got to work with some great players, the guys we ran up, the Americans they brought up to this camp were quite, Phil Wilson, Ashley Alexander, Frank Mantooth, Howie Smith,
Wow.
Jack Peterson. These were all, legends of jazz education at that point.
Yeah.
They were all great professional players, but they were really good teachers.
Mhm.
And so we had, had a wonderful time getting involved in that whole environment. Well, the next year I get a call from the coordinator saying it's about March, and he says, we have 33 people signed up. What do you want to do?
Wow.
Well, okay. So I think it was really short notice. So I had to just sort of throw 20 people in a room with a choral director, and I took 12 the way I had the year before, and we got through it. But then it brought the whole idea of, well, if this is going to continue, let's actually put a thing together, a plan together. And so we invented the camp up there, actually, in the sense that it was year 3, and we took 3 vocalists. I figured we'd have 36 singers, 30 to 35 singers if you want, and a rhythm section, and Floyd Standifer, who you knew, I met him. Floyd was part of that camp, and he did an amazing job with jazz history up there. And I said, oh my God, if you could do that for vocal jazz history, that'd be wonderful. And of course, that Floyd was not only a great trumpet player, but a wonderful singer. And so he was a double threat on the camp, and was a really amazing energy on the camp until he passed in, I want to say in 2007. Did you work with him? Did you?
Yeah.
Yeah, you did.
Yep.
We had a year with him, right?
Yeah.
In fact, I think that was the last year he was alive, was the year you were up there with us.
Yeah.
So anyhow, and of course, the first 2 people to bring up with me were Sheila Jordan and Jay Clay.
Yeah.
And so Sheila and Jay helped launch it up there. And by that time, I'm at Benedictine, and we're like, So one day, I remember it was like yesterday, we're sitting at the kitchen table, and Jack looks to me and says, we should make a camp. We should invent a camp, a vocal jazz camp. It's like the Mickey Rooney movies. Let's put on a show. I mean, really looking back at it, what I mean? At the time, it was like, oh yeah, that sounds good, but now when I look at what it took to do and all that work,
I can imagine that moment. I really
if
can't.
I know what I was getting into, I never would have done it. But
exactly.
once you're in it, you're like, well, I'm in it now, And of course, everything that could go wrong did. Everything wrong that first year. It was just hilarious. I'm amazed that Sheila and Jay even came back the second year because
they're improvisational,
Oh no, I mean we didn't have a facility. We had this jimmy rig lighting, and the first thing that happened upon the first 4 bars being played at the first night concert was everything went out. Sound, lighting, everything.
Oh good.
Oh no, it was a mess. But anyway, we got through that, and eventually it found its rhythm, and Sheila and Jay couldn't necessarily always, they were involved in Amherst. They did Amherst so many years together, and so that would sometimes, conflict in terms of dates. So I couldn't always get them. But meanwhile, I think Janet Lawson was the next person we brought in. Jay and Sheila did the first Chicago camp, and then then I started bringing other people in. And for a while, I was using the same folks, but then we realized that, well, I'll have to back up a minute and explain what the camp actually did, right? So the mission of the camp was to enable, it was created specifically for solo vocal development. And it, is at a time that we saw the need because this would have been like the mid 80s, late 80s. Vocal jazz education had by then gotten started, but it was completely choral. Everything was ensemble oriented. And, and we were thinking, well, even at that time, the gigs were getting less and the jam sessions were getting less. Where does a solo singer learn to do this? And so I felt that we would provide a valuable resource for as one demographic, as high school and college students were studying jazz or whatever, or voice, but would give them a place to actually learn how to sing vocal jazz. Now, ironically, the first year, I think every one of our participants were adults. So early on, that was the desire, was from adults who were like, oh my, and they were being sent to the camp mainly by instrumentalists who said, you know, you need to do this. This is a place that you can go to learn how to do this, you know. And so what we were trying to do is raise the bar for vocalists to consider themselves musicians. In other words, to think like a musician, not a singer. You know, and of course, you know, vocalists sometimes come into this with piano chops, with music background, with, you know, keyboard chops, with theory background, but probably more often than not, they don't. There may not be that much, you know, musical training. And so they have a lot of catching up to do compared with instrumentalists. And that really isn't the problem. I mean, the point wasn't to make them feel like you're way behind, but to realize that that you can start dealing with yourself, training yourself, studying, practicing, thinking about the music the way an instrumentalist does. And that way you start thinking about getting, I mean, how does an instrumentalist do this? Well, they start listening to the music, learning the rhythmic vocabulary, learning about jazz harmony, listening to their favorite soloists play solos, the innovators, how did they improvise, how did they come at the music, and then the big one for me is solo transcriptions. You know, learning people's solos and being able to sing them in order to get verbiage, in order to get good scat syllables, and that may be another thing we want to talk about later. But at any rate, so that was the main thing about the camp, and we kept it small. You know, we kept the whole thing of 3 singers, 3 faculty, but you know, the ratio had to be manageable because we were, as you remember, we were working on getting everybody ready for a concert on Friday night, singing a song, and if you remember that they hadn't sung before. And that was always kind of a provocative question because on the one hand, you know, how do you take a tune from scratch in a week and perform it on Friday, you know, ready to roll? And the fact is you can't. So we tried to instill the fact that it was a work in progress and, you know, don't worry about being finished with it. It was just a step on your way. The reason I had always made that stipulation was because I had students who came in with tunes they were singing, and I'd say to them, look, in the heat of the moment, you're going to go right back to your habits. You're not going to do a thing different. I'll guarantee you that. Money back guarantee if that doesn't happen. And every now and then one of them would plead with me, oh, let me sing this tune that I really want to work on this tune, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, okay. You know. And sure enough, man, I could have put money on it. They would come, and exactly what they did at the audition was exactly what they were doing later. You know, you remember that.
Yeah, I do.
But if you remember, it was also a crazy schedule. I mean, we had daytime was a jazz history class, a big session with your teacher in the morning, you and I and the students, each in our individual groups. Then we had lunch, then we had a master class and a theory class. Meanwhile, we were rehearsing for the concert that night. We went back and taught again in the afternoon, had dinner, took a nap, changed our clothes, made our faces, got on stage, sang a concert, went and hung till 1 a.m, went to bed, and all over again.
I remember the went and hung.
Oh,
that was really fun.
After a while, that was all I was doing the camp for.
Yeah, those were really good hangs. Yeah.
I know. I mean, that was one of the things in the job description was you had to be able to, you know, play piano and articulate your ideas and and also be able to hang out till wee hours and not take a hit. And Floyd Standifer, by the way, was the king of hanging.
Hey, before you go on, I just want to let you know there's a few people on, like Judy Silvano, but Mark Baldrich, he said, it's great to see you again. The way you're connected was he studied with Jack, and he also went to the American Conservatory of Music with Brett,
oh my God,
under the direction of James Dutton.
Oh yeah.
And he actually asked if James, if the music center, had any influence on your jazz camp.
You mean
James Dutton, Birch Creek?
Birch Creek. Oh no, yeah, no. We all were aware of Birch Creek at the time. In fact, I think Jack worked up there a couple of times. And oddly enough, ironically, funny you mention it, that was where we ended the camp, meaning after we folded it in North Central College here in Naperville, we had a very sudden, unique opportunity to transplant it up to Birch Creek, and we tried it.
Yeah.
They had a new executive director, and he was interested in adding a vocal week. And it wasn't a good fit. Primarily housing was a problem. It meant that, and maybe we don't need to go there. It was a tricky thing. We got through it, but it was, we looked at it at the end and went, no, probably not. It's not really what we were hoping for. So that's when we really put it to bed,
Yeah.
But we were aware of Birch Creek, but no, actually, I think more, the model was more the Jamie Aebersold jazz combo camps.
Yeah.
Because we were thinking of ourselves as a combo oriented or analogous to a combo, whereas Birch Creek was mainly doing larger ensembles, I think.
Okay. Yeah. Well, now that we've taken a breath.
Oh, I'm like a what do you call it, a loaded spring. I've been thinking about this for days, and it's not been good.
Well, it's funny. A lot of people, once I ask the question, it just, they get going, and I don't like to interrupt so much because I like to hear the complete thought, but I do want to be a good director.
Oh, you're great. No, you really. I have great admiration for how you've been guiding these chats. It's really, it's not something everybody can do. So kudos.
Thanks. Well, I like you guys. So it's kind of easy, it's like, oh, hi.
Well, and before we put away the jazz camp, I just, wanted to say that in the years we did this, we had all sorts of, it was a who's who of, for me, amazing, all the singers I admired. It was amazing because I could hire anybody I wanted who could make it, but I was cherry picking all these people I'd seen from afar and admired from afar and wanted to work with. And so I think a lot of my growth as a singer was also due to the fact that I was involved in this camp. And if you remember, one of the sweetest things we loved the teaching part of it, of course, but those evening concerts were quite a thrill.
Oh, yeah.
Because, the deal was we would feature two of the three singers each night with the rhythm section, and we split a concert, so we each did our own set. But we always did something together at the end of the concert. And, how many times do you see that happen? Be able to sing with not only one other singer, but then at the end of the week, we did a thing with everybody. And we had a couple of things with all three of us. And that was always a hoot because, the styles were always so different.
Yeah.
And, I remember the idea of, when we would sing a line together and I would hear three different ways of articulating that line, but it would all sort of kind of mush together, it didn't really, and if you remember, the rehearsals were so skimpy, we were mainly flying by the seat of our pants anyway,
Yeah, it gives you a good lesson on being yourself and it working. Everybody's themselves and it all works.
Yeah. And for me, the biggest challenge was just changing hats from, administrator to teacher to
artist,
to troubleshooter to putting out a fire to going on being an artist on stage and then going right back to being an
definitely. I could see that. And
it was very stressful.
Yeah, that's very admirable actually to watch and impressive. It's really impressive to see somebody do that, and you did it really well.
Well, thank you. And it beat me up. I used to be a lot taller.
Wow.
I'm teasing. But one of the
cool you drink and swear.
Oh, listen, yeah, drinking. We have funny stories about that. But no, on our 50th anniversary, which is in 2003, it was kind of a perfect storm of media. The NewsHour with Jim Lehrer from TBS had contacted me.
Oh.
Can you believe this? Looking for how do singers? They want to do a story on the reemergence of jazz singing. How do singers learn how to do this? And I couldn't believe I was on the phone with the guy. Like, I had this camp, and he said, oh, okay, tell me about it. And they came out, filmed all week, put together a, I don't know, a 8 or 10 minute clip maybe about the camp. It was amazing. It was so
Wow.
amazing. And at the same time they were there, WTTW, our NPR or public radio or public TV station, did a day on campus and did
Wow.
a thing. And then WBEZ, our national public radio station, decided to come out and record the last concert, which is a Bill Evans tribute, and put that on.
Crazy. What a crazy week.
It was nuts. And otherwise, I couldn't get arrested the rest of the years. But that year, it all sort of came together in this amazing way.
Who happened to be the other teachers?
Rosanna Vitro
Oh.
and Judy was still there. Yeah, Judy did it every year until maybe the late aughts.
Yeah,
I
because
can't
when
remember.
I was there, obviously when I was there with Jay.
But I think what the year you were, I think the year you were there might have been Judy's last year or almost last year, you know.
Right.
And then you know Jay came in more often, sort of thing. But over the course of the we used Karen Allison, Rosanna Vitro, you of course, Madeline Eastman, Kitty Margolis, Peter Eldridge, Rosanna Eckert, Judy Silvano. So it was quite. Those were wonderful days. I will never regret doing that. It was so much fun.
Wow.
And I remember, you know, it was so. I mean, you know, the couple years you were there, we had, you know, it was just so mellow. You were a wonderful addition to the faculty, and I know the students loved working with you.
Oh,
So
that was fun. I really do remember a lot of it. It was really a good time. Yeah. By the way, my friend Sandy Cummings is listening to Remembering the Rain.
You know, and that's I haven't done a lot of lyrics. I've written lyrics to I think 4 tunes, but that was the second Bill Evans tune I had done. The first one I wrote was 5, which was, you know, a very weird metric thing that Bill did, and very angular. And what happened was I wrote the lyric very easily and very quickly, and I submitted it to Nanette Evans, who was his widow, to see if she would approve the lyrics, and she loved them. So she approved them, and they are the official lyrics, and blah, 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 blah. And they actually, Folkways publishers put together the definitive Bill Evans fake book, or, you know, lead sheet book or whatever, at that time. And so it's included, my lyrics are included in that book.
Oh, that's nice.
So what happened was we did we had a year at the camp where we did a Bill Evans tribute, and I wanted to do that tune. And I wrote a new lyric to it, knowing that there already was one. And and it was, I think it was the year we were celebrating either his, you know, his birthday, his death, one of those, you know, cyclical things where it was a big year. And I think they had a box set of his that came out. So everybody had Bill Evans on the mind, you know. And I sent her the lyrics, and Nanette said, well, you know, Bill approved the other ones before he died. So you know, those are the official lyrics, and I can't, you won't be paid for these, but I love them, and please record them, and you have my blessing, and blah, 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 blah. So,
Cool.
yeah. And that was one of the rare moments in the studio. That was the last tune we did on that session. And it was Dan Hurley and Bob Bowman and Jack and I. And I remember it again, like it was yesterday. It was a one take thing, and we all looked at each other and went, don't touch it. You know, that was it. That's done. Don't even breathe another note, you know. Yeah, it was just one of those moments where, because we were all so, you know, Dan was a big fan of Bill's, and I was, and Jack. So we all just sort of channeled our love. And
Who was on bass?
Bob Bowman.
Oh, Bob Bowman. Yeah.
Yeah, Bob's been
He
with
was
us.
there when I was there too.
Oh, yeah.
That's part of why the hang was so memorable.
Oh, no, Bob and Jack went back years and years and years. They used to, you know, work together, rehearse together, hang together, you know.
Bob used to live in LA, right?
Yes, but he's originally,
that's how I
originally
met.
from Topeka, and Jack's originally from Emporia, so they were, in Kansas terms, just down the road from each other.
Yeah, Bob's a great bass player. Anyway, Sandy's giving you a compliment. Such an elegant voice, ethereal in quality.
Oh,
Beautiful.
thank you. I appreciate that. That's what I was
How,
going for.
how many CDs have you made or
Um,
albums?
I want to say four, well, actually five, except I never talk about the first one. Yeah, Judy Niemak and I, when we were, hanging together at camp, would always laugh about our first albums, because they both of us recorded albums kind of coming right off of classical singing and the
Oh,
classical realm and whatever, and our keys were all. I shouldn't say my keys were too high, but we were in a whole different place in our voices than we are now, and it actually did very well, but it was done on Seabreeze in the mid 80s. And then I got, busy, as we talked about, with teaching and with the camp and whatever. And so it was a while before I recorded again, but eventually got into it, and I recorded Agents of Change. I'm sorry, you'll have to excuse me. I don't remember the years anymore, but Agents of Change, and then From Every Angle, and then Promises to Burn. So that's four. And then most recently, we released something called Three Story Sandbox, which was a big departure because it's all freely improvised, and it's just Jack and Scott Robinson, multi-instrumentalist from New York, and I. And so that was, we released that. It's not under Jack's name or my name. It's just under Three Story Sandbox, because it was sort of a collaborative effort from the three of us.
cool.
But for my other albums, I mainly used rhythm section and one or two horns. And sometimes I would use vibes guitar, as when I started out with. Then we added piano, and we added saxophone, and then we went to trumpet, and I used a guitar trumpet rhythms for a long time. But my most recent album, Promises to Burn, featured Art Davis on trumpet and Scott Robinson on tenor. And I did a lot of the arrangements. And Jack's reminding me that I forgot about Lunar Octave, which is the first one after. Lunar Octave was the first album of my jazz life. I mean, my real jazz life. Whatever we imagine that I did early on to just get myself going was of a different. It was a different thing. I was bringing music in from other genres and trying to make them jazz and whatever, and it worked. But I'm happier with stuff after that. So yeah.
I think Agents of Change was happening when I was at the camp or something. Is that correct?
Could be, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I wish I can't remember when I.
Doesn't matter. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I should remember too, but I hardly ever remember years. I go by my marriages. I've had two marriages. I know when they both started, and I know when the first one ended, and and so I have significant moments in my history, that I.
No, that's true. I think about that. You're right, in terms of what did it align with in terms of significant events in your lives, and the year is like irrelevant. Yeah.
What's it like these days in Chicago? Or you're not in Chicago proper. You're in a suburb. But what's
Yeah,
it
I'm
like
out.
happening?
We've been living in Naperville now for many years, and Naperville's about 35 miles out, which isn't, it isn't too far out, but it's just far enough out where really there's enough of a how do I say this? We've been trying to really working on developing an audience out here, and of course that emanates from our work at the college. North Central College is right downtown, and in fact, you were there. Both of the times you were there was at North Central.
Yeah.
And the scene downtown well, right now nothing's going on, but even before it shut down, very few rooms left. I mean, the jazz showcase is still there, but it's as much pay to play as, I shouldn't say that, but the days of his bringing a headliner in for 5 nights are long gone.
Yeah.
Now there's the occasional booking, but it's more infrequent. And then there's the Green Mill, but other than Winters Jazz Club, and they're nice venues, but not enough. and I think you and I are both of an age where we must remember. I mean, Chicago, when I started, oh my God, you were tripping over places. You know, every place, every block downtown had a club with a tree and a singer. That was just the deal, you know. And so it was so easy to work because there were so many opportunities, so many gigs. You know, you had to be awful not to get work. You know, and those days are so gone, you know, so gone. So unfortunately, and the other problem I see is that, you know, it's down to teeny weeny. In other words, you know, a duo, trio at the most, really skinny music. You know, they want as few people as possible to get this done.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've gone in the opposite direction in the sense that, you know, my recordings are all a sextet.
Yeah.
You know, so try taking that anywhere. You know, it's been a challenge.
Do they have house venues there?
Not to any extent. There are the occasional. There are a couple of galleries and things that do, you know, that do concerts. There's some facilities like that have, you know, multi-purpose. But as far as actually people opening their homes, I did hear about some of that happening a few years back on the South Side, but I don't know that it's still going on.
Yeah. Let's see. Tanya Grubbs she's a great singer from Pittsburgh. Let's see, I had her on a few weeks ago. What can you share about your transition from classical into jazz, and what are some of the vocal techniques you had to think about differently? Can you remember?
Oh, yeah, actually.
Okay.
Well, okay, the good news is that my vocal technique, I actually built it in high school. I had a great vocal teacher in high school who, as I look back now, provided all my early training in terms of singing. And it was really solid. And so on the one hand, but I was an alto. So of course, you know, the issue I was talking about and that she, I'm sure, is aware of is that when you're singing classical music, you know, classical tunes, they don't call them tunes, do they?
Oh, we had this conversation the other day, actually. Somebody said, what's, you know, songs, tunes?
Right.
You know? Yeah.
Well, in other words, the tessitura is always higher. You know, the idea being, and I also realize that conceptually, philosophically, classical music is about achieving the ideal. So there is this ideal held up by every voice teacher in the world of the perfect soprano, I guess is what we want to, because all the juicy rolls are sopranos, so that's what you want to be, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, the tessitura is middle C to, you know, as far as you can get. So you end up getting used to singing in a place, you know, a sweet spot becomes a certain place in your voice where you know you can project because you're projecting for an acoustic room. Well, it took a while for me to adjust to that, even though I understood that on a microphone, I didn't want to sing up there and I needed to lower my keys. There was still a psychological resistance to go too far. You know, a fourth, oh my God, that's too much, but maybe a third, you know. Yeah. Instead of just saying, never mind where it was, just go here fresh and sing and see where you want your voice to be, you know? So it took me a while, longer than it should have, to kind of work through that. And as I listen to my albums over the years, the keys have gone lower. Well, so how is my voice? You know, I have a whole different range now. It's the same size, it's just slipped an octave. So I can teach all my guys, you know, their part in their real voices, you know, and it just freaks them out because I'm like, blah, 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 blah. But I have no high, you know, the sopranos are like, it's like dogs, dog whistle, me singing, it's like, you don't hear it out. Well, anyway, that's now, but to answer the question, you know, so there was the issue of keys, but the other issue, of course, is that jazz is completely different in terms of whereas classical music is saying, I'm going to try to fit, trying to fit you into the mold of what we want you to sound like this. Now let's get you there. Jazz is the opposite, where it's saying, you know, whatever you sound like, whatever your unique sound is, that's what we want. We don't care whether you have a big voice, big range. It would be nice to have a nice voice, to have a good sounding voice, but you know what? That's not always necessarily. I mean, look at Louis Armstrong. you know,
Yeah.
and how appealing and how communicative he was in spite of the fact that he didn't have any of that going on. So, those were the two main. Oh, and the other issue, of course, was vibrato. Oh, let's talk
Oh,
about
yeah.
vibrato. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the good news, I guess, about my music training was that even though, my vocal training was mainly the straight ahead classical stuff, arias and art songs and so forth. I graduated with a BA in voice and musicology, and I went to grad school at U of I in Champaign for musicology. Wasn't a good decision, but at the time I thought it made sense, so here I was. And as soon as I got down there, I realized what a bad fit it was. I was basing it on my love of history and my basic. I was a studious kind of person. I didn't mind doing research and so forth, and I hadn't really come to terms with my wanting to be a singer yet. I was still. I don't know what I thought I was going to do. Teach music on some level. Music history. But when I went to grad school and got to musicology, I realized, oh, no, this will never do. And I tried getting through it. I was there 3 years, and it was a wonderful music education. It was really where I got my musical education, if you wish. But the reason I'm talking about it is because I had the opportunity there to sing with a new music group called the Ineluctable Modality. And it was a new music group I was with for 3 years that sang all sorts of, avant-garde, new music compositions, Yanis Xenakis, Morgan Powell. I can't think of the other guy. There's another one. Anyway, quarter tone music, chants music, improvisatory techniques, all sorts of compositional techniques that were being used mid-century. And had a wonderful time, but that brought me in contact with straight tone because nobody wanted to hear about vibrato in that context.
Yeah.
And so I left that experience with two things. First, a real appreciation and a love for experimental music on any level. I wasn't always involved with it throughout my life, but anytime I had an opportunity to, I was always there.
Yeah.
And secondly, the realization that you could control vibrato and that it was definitely a device used in a specific style, i.e. classical bel canto singing, as in opera, and classical music in general. But that, if you think about it, I can't think of another world music on the globe that really uses a vibrato a lot. I mean, mainly vocal styles are straight tone, whether it's Japanese or Middle Eastern or
except for those
African.
Russian, except for the Russian, that Russian, I forget what it's called, but it's
yeah.
I can't even demonstrate it.
Yeah, and so I know there are exceptions to that, but in general, and so and also the fact that I feel that between Miles Davis and Astrid Jobim, Astrid Jobim, listen to me, Astrid Gilberto, those two, Miles's big emergence on the mainstream stage, if you will, in America was like 1959-60, right? That was when he was at Columbia, and he did the amazing projects with Gil Evans and whatever. And so, suddenly we're all hearing him. Even if you weren't a jazz fan, you were aware of Miles Davis, and you heard his straight tone, how he played that trumpet. And right about the same time, we were introduced to the bossa nova by way of Astrid Gilberto singing "Girl from Ipanema," and this became a hit so the U.S. was awash with bossa nova, and I think that was the first time that the American public would have heard that dry, that contained, that different a sound than what we in America always considered, because it was the well-developed voice, and even jazz singers of that day always looked at classical music as the ideal. They were somehow trying to aspire to that. I remember Joe Williams talking in interviews about that. Sarah Vaughan talking about that. That they would still consider that was the be-all and end-all of fine singing. So that's my treatise on straight tone.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and Sarah, of course, had operatic training as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, my teacher's always bringing her up because he said she just could, she could utilize that, all the
Yeah.
colors and.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that for me, I think, is the bottom line, is what I always wanted to achieve technically, was simply just access to my whole voice and complete ease of using it.
Yeah.
And I think, for me, technique should be invisible, and technique wants to be totally, totally internalized, and it's the whole point is not to make it strenuous, but to make it easy and to make it free to sing. That's always my wish for.
Yeah, I mean, that brings to mind Cecile McLaren Salvant. Great
Exactly.
instrument, and if you didn't know any better, you wouldn't know, you wouldn't know that she had trained, and that everything is like so together.
It's so natural.
Sounds
Yeah.
just, she sings, and
Yeah.
she's an artist, and she sings all different styles well, but we know that she put in a lot of work to have that beautiful instrument.
Yeah.
Yeah, really interesting. How did you how did you come up in, like, what was your youth like? Were you surrounded by music stuff?
Oh, okay. This is
I was a wee orphaned girl in school.
no. I had a very happy childhood. I was an only child, la la la, and I had access to. Actually, I was one of those children who, was multi-talented. So, I had lessons in art, I had lessons in dance, I had lessons in me. But my father, okay, let me set this stage. So my Chicago in the 50s. This is when I grew up. Immigrant town, large population of Polish and Italian. I mention that because what instrument did they all play? Accordion. My dad was an amateur accordionist in his youth. And so when I was born and, a small child, he I was destined. In other words, he was chomping at the bit. And he bought me a small, a small accordion. I forget what they called it, 10 bass, I think. It was just like a miniature accordion,
Yeah.
Scaled down accordion. And I had melody bells with music,
Melody bells.
colors. Do you remember melody bells? And my dad got, colored tape and put on the keys, and I was able to learn how to play music by looking at the colors on the paper of the melody bells. That's my first, yeah. So I was, fiddling around on the accordion. Well, I went into accordion lessons formally at 7. And, I didn't know any better, because the fact is there was a big accordion scene in Chicago in those days. And of course, when you're little, you trust your parents are going to lead you the right way. They're going to give you guidance as to what is appropriate. Oh yeah. So so I became a really good accordionist. I was dead serious about being a good musician, and I practiced, and I did now I had the benefit of studying with a teacher who was a composition major at DePaul, and he put me through a regimen of theory, having to write them out and play them. I had to write out all the scales and arpeggios in every key. And
accordion is not an easy instrument either.
Well, the reason I bring this up at all, I mean, there were many years when I wouldn't acknowledge it. I was totally embarrassed by it, and I would just say I played keyboard. Never, enough said, But I'm talking about it now because I began to realize, wow, it was the perfect instrument for me to learn music on, and here's why. The right hand, of course, is like a piano keyboard, so nothing more to say there. But the left hand is set up in rows. So from top to bottom, the dead center of the pad here is middle C, and it's arranged in the circle of fifths, up sharps, down flats. And then the rows this away are your bass line, and then major, dominant, minor, diminished chords. So when you go pa pa, you're playing bass chord, bass chord. So you're doing that in the left hand. And now, you put the two together and whatever, but my point being that now that I'm looking at jazz theory and the circle of fifths and transposing music and just how harmony works in terms of the whole fourths and fifths thing, that whole relationship, which is sort of a foundation of tonal harmony and how that all works. you know, it was like a beautiful laboratory that I've got totally internalized, and I'm like, yeah. And so I can to this, you know, to this day sit down and transpose something if it's in a fourth or a fifth. I'm good to go. I can think from C to F or C to G. You know, don't ask me to go from C to E flat, but I can do those fourths and fifths. And the other thing about the instrument was that the music that we played, even though, I mean, in those days, you know, there were actually accordion stars, and then when they'd have a hit tune, can you believe this? Then the music would be published, and then all the students would learn how to play those tunes, you know. But meanwhile, my teacher, what I didn't explain to you was that the school that I attended was a huge school with hundreds of students and 4 locations. Oh. And each of the locations had a bevy of bands. They put all the students into bands, you know, in levels. Oh. And so you worked your way up in the bands, you know, and of course the top band was all the teachers and the proteges. So yeah, I wanted to be in it. So that was what I set my sights for. I was going to go till I got in that thing. And I did. But I was like 19 by the time I got there and going to college. So it was a little.
Wow.
And so, so my point being,
you played accordion all those years?
Oh yeah. And I was like, I practiced every 2 hours a day, the whole deal.
Oh my God. Do you still have an accordion?
I still have it. I haven't touched it. Well, I put it on once, but I haven't played it. You know,
I hate to tell you, but there are some heavy jazz people in LA who are actually taking out their accordions.
Well, you know, because it's being used now in some very interesting ways. And when you use it in a certain context, it's very cool. But the problem then was it was translating classical and semi-classical music. And, you know, it's a woodwind instrument. Basically, all the stops are like piccolo, you know, oboe, flute, blah, blah, blah. So if you like that sound, fine. If you don't have any other choices. But in any case, my teacher was also the arranger for this top band. And he would take classical material and translate it for 60 accordions. And they'd be, he'd take the orchestral sections and he would apply them that way. So we played Night on Bald Mountain and laid preludes and themes from pictures from the Mikado. I mean, we played all this material. So I was learning classical instrumental music through the freaking accordion.
Wow, that's really impressive.
I know, it's pretty whacked out.
I've never heard that story from anybody else.
No, because I wouldn't even make it public till now. I'm old enough to be self-assured enough where I can talk about it.
Oh my God.
Well, at 14,
that's incredible. Yeah.
In fact, at 14, I applied to Interlochen.
Yeah.
And got this letter back saying, "Dear Ms. Borla, we regret to inform you there's no accordion program at Interlochen." And that was when it dawned on me that this was not a legitimate instrument, that my dad had sold me down the river. I didn't talk to him for 2 weeks. I eventually got over it, and I kept going, because I wanted to get it. It was my goal. I had set the goal for being in this band, so I was going to do it. And I did it for a year. My poor father, now listen to this. I hope this doesn't take too long. By my dad, I was in school in Lake Forest, which was about, 50 minutes north of Chicago. And we were living in one of the western suburbs, just, maybe 8 miles out of the city. So my dad would have every Monday night were the rehearsals. He would have to go to the from our house. He'd have to drive up to Lake Forest and pick me up, take me down to the south side of Chicago, 3-hour rehearsal till 10 o'clock, put me back in the car, take me back to the college, and then go home.
Wow.
And he did this every year for a week.
He was committed.
Oh, he was committed. He was more into it than I was,
Wow.
And I was probably doing it more for him at that point than for me, but, it was one of those things,
Yeah.
So, anyway, I think we've talked enough about that.
So cool. You know what? I have to say, my sister played accordion. And I just remember, actually, let's see, where did I see? I guess my other sister's daughter has it. And it's a really beautiful instrument. It's white and that color blue that airs out.
Yes.
I guess accordions used like bright colors like that, right? Red.
Oh no, mine's the black one. It was like a very elegant. You outgrew the blue and red ones and the gold ones. And
with diamond or pearl keys, right?
Exactly. Yeah. But it was a very a lot of the music you played was arpeggiation. I mean, the arpeggiation was a big deal on the accordion. And so kind of translating that now to me as a singer, um, it's a huge advantage because when I deal with my students who come in who haven't had any keyboard, background to speak of, it's really a tough haul for them to learn how to express chords. And, you have to be able to do that, I think, in order to improvise. You have to be able to express the chord changes as completely as you can, at least in terms of a foundation. You don't have, eventually you can leave that, but that has to be there in your sights or
I agree.
And
I need to, I have this chronic cough, and I have my little vocal zone. That's what you guys keep seeing me take in and out of my mouth. Sorry about that. But I need to get a little bit more. Would you answer this question while I go get them? What about rhythm? Any experience with how to rethink classical versus jazz?
I'm not sure I understand the question yet.
Well, I think she's just saying that the relationship of classical and jazz rhythms, how do they combine or not combine?
Okay.
Yeah.
Actually, now that I think about it, it's a great question. Maybe I want to say that classical rhythm is, well, first of all, what you see on the page is literally what you are expected to play, in the sense that you're held to those specific rhythms, but the rhythm itself is conceived. How do I say this? Well, in other words, the downbeat, the downbeats 1, 2, 3, 4 are what we always think about as being the markers, and we realize that there are eighth notes in between, but the gist of things, or the thrust, is still on, I think, the downbeats. That, and the fact that rhythm in classical music in general, I think, is downplayed a tad in favor of well, maybe it's not so much rhythm, but the sense of pulse. In jazz, we think about a definite pulse, about a definite groove, as always being operable, and nothing violates that. Once we set the tempo, it's set. Whereas in classical music, if you listen to, I can't see it. If you listen to symphony orchestra, the conductor is conducting the orchestra, and there's this kind of ebb and flow of time. There's this swelling of time. So it's a little freer in terms of what the conductor wants to do. But because we don't have a conductor in jazz, we're on our own. So that's, I think, reason why the groove is so sacrosanct in jazz. But more specifically, if you're talking about whether swing or even eight, let's talk about swing first. Swing rhythm is really, it's obvious that we're taking even eighths or evenly divided eighth notes, or I'm sorry, an evenly divided quarter note, and dividing it unevenly into more of a triplet undertow. But I think what's really is as important is the articulation of the upstrokes. So if you think about how syncopation works, it's about the idea that there's a lot of activity, melodic activity, on the upstrokes as versus the downstrokes. And that's something that you have to kind of adjust to, I think, because in classical music, I don't feel that's true at all. And even if you look at even eight music, the same applies. I always talk to my students about feeling the upstroke, instead of not feeling the weight of the downbeat is intrinsic. It's, by definition, it's going to feel weight. So you don't have to hammer it. See, I'm trying, and even when I phonate, when I make phonemes to express it, I'm using a small sound and a large sound, because I want the upstroke to be the larger gesture. Do ba do ba do ba do ba. And if I sing even eight, same thing. So I think maybe that would, I hope that answers your question, or at least gives you something to go on. That's kind of what represents, or what I think represents the difference for me between the two. The feeling of time, the time feel, whether it's a relative or absolute, and how we're actually looking at the specific rhythms.
Yeah, thank you. And just a question that I'll bring up. I find that for workshops, especially, students need and desire to groove, and especially in Japan. And I'm always trying to figure out, new ways to teach them that. Uh, any any ideas of yours on how to teach groove to somebody?
Wow. I nothing nothing comes to mind other than well, just listening to it and feeling allowing yourself to physically engage in the sound. I mean, sometimes I think singers don't realize they're physical beings.
Yeah, I agree.
And there's a sense of my voice is this ethereal thing that's coming from me, but it has nothing to do with my body.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, 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 no. You have to be connected physically. It's such a physical thing to sing. And so the connection to the groove, I think, is visceral, or should be visceral. And I had another thought. When I have people who have problems processing the rhythms, I mean, I whether it's a lead sheet or, I have kids in my vocal jazz ensemble, and those charts are very specific about rhythm. So some of them struggle. And I remind them that, 4/4 time is just really an outgrowth of cut time. And if you think about how the music evolved at the turn of the century, you think about jazz, New Orleans, so forth, or even the early 20s, when we call it 2-beat music, where music was felt in 2 big beats. And we talk about marches, the fact that, marching, bump, bump, ba-dum, bump, ba-dum, bump. And so the idea of just getting in touch with those 2 halves of the bar, not the 4 beats, but just the 2, and aligning yourself with left, right, whatever. And the fact that 4/4 is just an extension of that, or expansion of that. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And or 1, 2, 3, 1, whatever meter you're in. And that maybe that's a way into connecting with the groove. Is just that basically being connected to the elementary feeling of what drives the groove.
Yeah, yeah. I've seen people here, like, I remember Jay Clayton had people walk around the room while the song was playing in time. It was interesting. A lot of the people couldn't continue that.
Right.
They'd start off and then they'd,
right.
Because
we're all trying to, nobody wants to be locked into having to count through a tune or count, how many. Yeah. You have to be able to feel intrinsically or instinctively. And so however you do that. And I think the rest of it is just putting a groove on, whether it's a recording or a rhythm section or whatever, and just having people make sound in it. In other words, you don't even have to think about singing so much. This is something that when we work on improvisation, I'm very big into using rhythm first and just kind of speaking it.
Yeah.
Just kind of, because it takes the heat off the singing thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Everybody can speak,
right.
But not everybody feels like they can sing, to their to the point they want to be good.
Right.
So a way to kind of get into that is to just take the pitch thing off the table altogether and just focus on rhythm, and to sort of get in touch with, or get used to, create your own rhythms that align with that groove, I think.
Yeah. I have another friend, Armando Campion, who's a bass player and a singer. And he has a great one for a Latin groove. I gotcha, I getcha, I gotcha, I getcha. And it's good. It's really fun, and it really is it's the groove, Anytime
I have to kick off a funk tune, I always use the Pointer Sisters. I know I got a chick on the side. I know I got a chick. I know I got a chick on the side.
That's so cool. Yeah.
It always freaks my students out, but I hate it. It works.
Who did you, amongst all your other kind of involvement in music, were you into funk and rock and all that kind of stuff?
I'm older than that. Well, I mean, yeah, I see what you're saying.
Well,
I mean,
like
I didn't grow up with it, but I mean, well, let's put it this way. I spent a part of my career doing gigs where you had to cover everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've never really. There was no reason to stop doing those. I ended up working with a contractor who got who had all the A-list yada yadas, and it was but I had to cover all sorts of pop styles, funk, groove, Motown, all that stuff. But and I have fun with it. It's very different from what I do as an artist. But again, I look at that as that idea of entertainment as versus artistry sometimes.
Yeah. Okay, what was a record or two that you played the crap out of so much that you had to replace? That's a question I occasionally like to ask.
I don't know that I have one that I really wore out. I think I would glom onto something for a while, then I would leave it. Are you talking about when I was younger or now as a jazz artist?
Probably coming up.
No, I really can't think of any particular recording, but you have to remember we were all living in the shadow of Barbra Streisand, in terms of vocalist. She was the looming presence in terms of a vocalist in my generation, And again, Judy and I compared notes about that,
Yeah.
But I was a pretty eclectic listener, and I got into medieval lute music when I was in grad school, and that's all I played for 3 years. I wasn't listening to singers or vocalists at all. I was into very abstract, linear music.
You're kind of a conundrum.
Well, thank you.
I didn't actually know that this information about your past and your focus on, both accordion and the lute music. I mean, that's quite significant amount of time.
Well, I think again, it takes me back to the fact that I'm wired like an instrumentalist. That's how I started music, and I started singing at 12, which was still young, but I've still had the mental set of an instrumentalist, and I think that is a piece of why even now, I mean, as I look at my own music history, my own career history, whatever, I keep coming back to the fact that sometimes I feel like an instrumentalist trapped in a singer's body, or maybe it's a singer trapped in an instrumentalist's body. I'm not sure which. But in any case, I look at myself as being, how do I say, a vocal instrumentalist. So I'm using my voice as my instrument.
Yeah.
Now, this takes us into the whole, kind of coming back to the whole idea of lyrics. I'm very hesitant to talk about this in a sense because even in so many sessions I've heard you do over the last several weeks, singers and lyrics, they kind of like hand in glove. But I've always felt like there was another way to go. Not that I had to leave one behind to do the other,
Mm-hmm.
but why can't a voice express feeling and emotion and all of that non-verbally, just like a horn would? And I always use horn players as my model for that. And even in the sense of improvising over a ballad, nobody was doing that, particularly recording. That's I'm going to get off that one subject, hop onto another, which was the idea that I was always found it very curious and sort of distressing that even the singers, our contemporaries who were recording, with record companies, who I knew could improvise, weren't necessarily allowed to do that on their recordings. They weren't encouraged to, for sure, and sometimes they were just flat out, denied to do that. And as a result, a lot of times I wouldn't hear a vocalist improvise till I saw them live, because I didn't hear it so much on their recordings, and thought, such a shame, because these were amazing improvisers, and it should have been captured more on, in their body of work in terms of recording.
I've noticed that too.
Yeah. So anyway, the idea of doing tunes without lyrics, it's just another aspect of my feeling more akin to an instrumentalist than to a vocalist. And again, I don't eschew lyrics by any means. I know how powerful they are and but I feel like there's room for both. There's room for this and there's room for that, and I try to make the case for that.
Judy Silvano is adding to that. She's glad you're talking about it.
Hey, Judy, what do you think? What do you have to say?
Well, she said she tries to express emotion and feeling through non-word tones and articulation.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why Judy ended up on camp, because I sensed that about her. I mean, each one of you that we interacted with, I knew had that going on, whether or not that was a big part of your recording or not. It was immaterial. I knew that you were into that, and that was one of the things we were trying to convey to the students, is you don't have to know how to improvise right away, but you should be wanting to look at that and get yourself involved in it, and we'll try to give you the laboratory to at least get your toes in the water.
Yeah.
And that was the thing about the camp. And I would always try to hammer this home, was you're not going to come out of here done by any means. Oh my God, we're just opening the can right now, and you're hoping to give you all sorts of resources to take home that you can work on for years.
Yeah. I've interviewed a few people who are married to musicians, and the combination, well, Judy, I interviewed Judy, and Joe came on at the end.
Right.
And their relationship is so long-term and so involved in music, and they've worked together a lot, and obviously they both admire each other, and it's a real distinctive thing.
You're describing our marriage to a T. Yeah. We've been together, I want to say 35 years, something like that. And we work together, we live together. I mean, we're kind of together 24/7. I think most people can't believe anybody can do that. And most people want to spend time away from their spouses. And the social, the lockdown we're in, the shelter at home thing, is nothing's changed for us, really. Yes, we're not going out as much, but the point is we're still spending every day together the way we always do, So, but it's wonderful. It's really been an amazing part of my growth as a singer, as a musician. I've never I don't know anybody who knows more about this music. I really, truly don't. Jack, no matter what album you mention, he'll tell you who everybody, not only the drummer on it, but all the personnel. It's nuts. He's like a encyclopedia of jazz. It's really handy.
Yeah. How has his playing influenced you?
Oh no. Oh, how's playing? Oh, that's a great question. Well, I can tell you one of the first things that we noticed about each other on the gig, we met on a gig years ago, was I looked back and he looked at me, and we went, whoa, did we feel time together? That was the first thing, was we locked in, and it was like kismet, As far as influence, I think, again, what I said to earlier in the session today, he mentored me a lot at the beginning. We talked a long time about, in other words, preparing me to teach. by his asking me questions, and we taped them, and I took notes afterwards, and we sort of just delved into, what I had going that I could offer, and how I would approach the transition to jazz, tunes to look at and whatever. And he's still very important. He'll oftentimes suggest a tune to me, and it's kind of funny. I'll sit on them for years, yeah. And then I'll finally get it out and I go, my God, what? He was right. Why on earth am I not doing this 20 years, 4 years ago? It's always, so he's very prescient about good tunes. And he's also a wonderful arranger. The work he does with his combo at the college is really amazing.
Yeah.
And the things that he's able to do with them in terms of teaching them how music works. I think that's the issue, is how the pieces work together, especially rhythm section. Yeah. I've learned so much by living with him. It's really amazing.
Let's see. Judy was saying, listening to the other instruments can give you lots of ideas. And if you're daring enough to try and create music as a musical instrument without the expectation people have of singers, surprising and powerful things can happen. Yeah.
I wonder if we could talk about our newest project and re-improvisation a little bit, if you don't. Is that okay?
Yeah. What is? I
just didn't want to go without having said talking about this.
What's the title of it?
Huh?
What's the title?
Well, I'm saying that Jack and I started a not-for-profit agency or organization a few years back called Flashpoint Creative Arts, and its mission is to promote improvisation beyond, in all ways, as much as possible beyond jazz. I mean, certainly there, but trying to get other people involved in it. The general public to understand it more, to possibly participate in it, because it's such a catalyst for so many things. It took us a minute to get rolling, but what this last couple of years have been, suddenly things started to pop. For one of the things we do, we co-sponsor the jazz concert series at the college, and that's cool. And that kind of put us on the map in terms of letting people know that we're out there. But we had a very serendipitous encounter with a group of autistic students a couple of springs ago. There's a group here, an organization here in Naperville called Little Friends that runs a center for autism. So it has a school for kids K through 12. It also has a program for adults. It has several components for the autism community. And a woman from the Naperville Rotary Club of Naperville, Alma Jones, contacted us and asked us if she could arrange for a group of them to come over and hear Jack's combo rehearsal. And he said, yeah, sure, why not? So I was there, and it was an hour and a half, and so they bring 60 people. They've got students and their handlers, their staff, and the people from Rotary. And so Jack's doing his rehearsal, and about halfway through, he turned it over to me and said, I think Janice will talk a bit about vocal improv. And so I started with the group by just, doing some call response. Oh, he'll do some rhythm. Now he'll put some pitch. And we had the student rhythm section and two singers with me, that could demonstrate.
Yeah.
And so we traded fours, and this is on blues, B-flat blues. But before I got up, I had asked one of the staff if there was anybody that she knew that would be willing to get up and sing with me. And she said, yeah, that guy over there. So sure enough, I say, oh, somebody like to come up and sing with me. And sure enough, he comes up. And he traded fours with me for a couple of choruses. Well, once we did that, all the hands went up. So now one after the other, they're coming up, and we're hugging each other afterwards. And it was a gay time. And so it obviously went well, but we were all sort of astonished at how this all went. And, and I have to say, I was improvising the whole thing. In other words, there was no plan.
Yeah.
But oftentimes, as you often know, you get the best results when you just put yourself in the flow And that's why I think the improvisation piece is so important for people in general, because it helps. I know I'm off on a tangent, but it helps
No,
adapt.
but it's a great tangent.
It gives you the flexibility, the confidence to tackle things, instead of, oh, I'm not ready. Oh, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Let's just see what happens, And so anyway, afterwards, Jack had been standing next to a staff person, and he noticed that she had been crying, and he said, are you okay? And she said, well, the young man who sang with Janice hasn't said a word in class in 2 years. And so we were all like, oh my, this is very profound.
Yeah.
And so we talked with Alma, and we talked with little friends. And so long story short, we arranged to work with them regularly. And so Jack and I and one of my accompanist at the college, a piano player, goes over to Little Friends every 2 weeks and works with them. And we worked with them over last academic year. And boy, it took a while. It took a minute to get them rolling, but and these are like middle school kids, 12, 13, 14 years old. But by the time we got through the year, they were snapping and twirling. I mean, we put them as guests on our concert, the last, our final concert for like a showcase for all the jazz groups. And they got up and traded fours with me and with each other. And then one of them took a couple choruses, and he stood in front of the monitor, and he looked like it was amazing. It was totally transformative. And their parents were like, oh my God, So it was really, really amazing. And so we're still working with them this year. We're stopped because everybody's closed down, but our intention was to continue with them, So that happened in April of, I think, 18. And in the summer, we were invited to work with a couple of groups that were on campus for the summer. These are kids who are at risk financially, culturally. They're from, really under resourced communities in the area. And we did a 90-minute vocal workshop with them. Same deal, rhythm section and me and group stuff. And then I would have them come up with me individually. And we had a ball. And the idea being that I'm using vocal improvisation, not because we're not going to teach them how to sing. That's not the point. I'm not even sure I care if you learn how the blues scale works. We're just trying to engage people in being able to
respond.
So some of them would sing exactly what I would sing, and some of them would get the idea that they could go on their own thing, depending on who they were and how old they were and whatever. But it was really, we did 2 of those, and they were really a lot of fun. And so last October, Jack and I took our groups out to his hometown, Emporia, Kansas, and we had a gig there at a refurbished theater in town, and for both of our groups. And then we stayed in town to do. We offered workshops for students. Same thing. We're looking for autistic students, whatever. And we worked with a music therapist in Emporia. Well, she brought in 7 groups in one day. And so on every hour, a different group would come in, and we did these things for every hour for 7 hours with a different. And they were autistic adults. There were some very severely disabled children. It was a mixed bag of things, But they had a great time. So, this thing has taken on a kind of a direction I never saw coming. It's never in a million years would I have planned that for myself. But it just happened, and we kind of responded to it, and it's been amazing. It's been totally amazing. We're having so much fun.
Tell us the name of it again.
Well, the organization's called Little Friends.
Your organization?
No, our organization is called Flashpoint Creative Arts.
Flashpoint Creative Arts. Okay.
But what I'm really kind of, if you will, what the real purpose, or one of the real purposes we put it together, or the visions we had for this organization, was to launch a new event. And so we're envisioning this to be probably a 3-evening multi-arts event that's going to be combining uh, it's going to be bringing artists from different genres together on the same stage and improvising. So, and so the musical component is going to be three-story Sandbox. Now, I didn't talk about that very much, but now I will. And that is that when we, when Jack recorded his album, his last album, not in Monastery, but the one before that. I think it was his recording. We had an extra day in the studio. We do the recording here in the studio because we can. We have the space, and the engineer can bring his stuff in, and we're all set to go here. We had an extra day where Scott Robinson was still in town for a day before he got on a plane to go home, and the recording engineer was here. And so Scott and Jack had done a number of free things together. For years, they'd known each other for years and have done free concerts. And so they've said, well, let's just do some free stuff. Let's just fool around. We got one more day. What the hell? And so I'm sitting there just mellowing out, hanging out. And pretty soon Jack says, well, why don't you put a mic up for Janice? And I'm thinking, oh, no. So they did. And magic ensued because we did 45 minutes.
Wow.
What happened was Jack gathered, made himself a station of gongs. And Scott, I know Scott Robinson, anybody who knows Scott Robinson will understand this about him. He's like, he has this amazing sense of play and curiosity. And, Jack has all these miscellaneous instruments around, percussion instruments and whatever. So Scott just ran around the room and found some things he liked. And he put them on the floor and his saxophone, and that's what we used for the recording. So they would just grab things and whatever. And we did 45 minutes straight of music, and it was amazing. It was really cool stuff. And that ended up being the beginning of 2 albums. We brought Scott back one more time to just get a little more material, and then we created 2 albums from that. Jack did a duo he did a lot of duo tracks with him. It's called Snakeheads and Ladybugs. And then 3-story Sandbox is the stuff that incorporates me. And I think you and I had talked about it when I first, when I first recorded it.
Yeah.
And it was DownBeat picked it as an editor's pick that February. It was like, what?
Oh.
Free music, really? But it was a groove, and there are like 30 instruments that are cited on the album because of all the stuff that they were playing. So anyway, that was there, and meanwhile we're doing, we're trying to put this new organization together, and so the 2 are coalescing, in the sense that unit, with the addition of Fareed Haq on guitar and probably Larry Gray on bass, will be the musical unit every night, freely improvising while said artists do their thing with us. So one evening we have, so far we have lined up a Japanese calligrapher who paints, to improvise music. And then the next night we have a spoken word person, Kirpal Gordon, who's located on the East Coast, who improvises jazz poetry over music, jazz music specifically. We've talked to, you're going to have Stephen, the free play guy.
Oh, Stephen Nachmanovich.
Yeah, we talked with him about possibly being involved. We're still working on a dancer. We have a couple of ideas. We'd love to get Savion Glover, but he's just really hard to get a hold of. I'm still working on that. So, we're just trying to kind of put this new thing together that will hopefully give us a chance to just explore improvisation on another dimension, and to take it further or beyond jazz music specifically. And we're hoping to, not only draw an audience for these specific nights, but to be able to give young emerging artists, what I didn't mention, I guess, is the fact that the artists we're looking at are themselves on the cutting edge. They're not within the tried and true realm of this or that and the other. They're pushing the envelope, and they're a little left of center in what they're doing, And so, and we like that. We're trying to find, quirky stuff to make the point that that young people who aren't maybe getting recognized or encouraged because they're not in the choir or they're not in the band or they're not in the la la la, or in the traditional art thing, there's a place for them and that they can be inspired by the kinds of artists that they're seeing at this thing. And we certainly plan to have, if possible, either daytime sessions or whatever that would give a Q&A or workshops or whatever demonstrations by the artists to be able to engage the audience that way as well. So I guess that's what wants to replace the vocal jazz camp.
Yeah, boy, that is just all superb.
Yeah.
There's
And it really, I mean, we're hoping to do this. Well, we were looking at next summer, but then with all this going on, I have it's hard to gauge how to plan for this,
I was just going to say that LA has an kind of an improvisatory, abstract community who pops up in the general public's vision every now and then. One person who's forwarding it is he's really one of the best percussionists in town, named Brad Dutz. He's a really crazy, cool, wild guy, and he's very much in the moment and just super creative. He's in actually my group, The Moment, which I recorded. So he and actually the way The Moment even came together was Brad and the pianist Gary Fukushima, who was on electric keyboard. So the three of us were doing a gig, and then we invited this great tenor player, Chuck Manning, and then this guitar player, Jeff Richmond, showed up on the gig, and he said, "Oh, can I sit in?" Mm-hmm. And that was it. And yeah. We all are very, I mean, we could go years without playing, and then when we play together, it's the same, same thing. Anyway, but Brad has this basically like a new modern music series that he's been doing for a few years in a really funky little artist place in Sun Valley here, in Sunland, and called Sun Space. And so he does it every Thursday night, and he's had all kinds of people. I mean, really well-known people within that genre. And it's really great. I mean, I have to say, he's probably one of the guys who's really forwarding that here. And even so, there's not a lot. I try and help him, like PR it and stuff, but it's really, it's a fascinating experience to go and be in the audience. It's just most of the time it's really rewarding. There's something that it kind of peels open your heart, and it peels open your heart, and it touches something very different inside of you to hear improvised music,
Yeah.
Especially when it's done together, and which is also another thing that I've been into with my vocal group, Fish to Birds. So even though we fall into like some tools that work for us, like harmonizing in little spots, and there's tools that we use, but we're still always creating something out of nothing. And like when you first started talking about this, you were saying, it's good for everybody, and it is good for everybody. It's because people, even executive directors of big firms, they need to know that being in the moment and improvising is okay, and they need to.
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot of interest now in the corporate environment, corporate community, looking at improvisation, and they're looking to. I think the natural thing to do has been look at comedy improv, to bring them into their workplace to help, to do workshops with their, but what they're trying to get their employees to deal with is thinking outside the box, collaborative thinking, it's team building, all those things that jazz musicians do naturally, day to day, because we're working together, and I'm not even talking about free improvisation. Any kind of improvisation involves those same skills.
Yeah.
And the thing about the Sandbox project was, I think, one of the crucial pieces is Scott. And I say that, well, actually Scott and Jack, because, you know, Jack can play, in terms of drums, can play such a diverse band of styles. I mean, he's very open about that, open-minded. And Scott's one of the most musical players when I listen to him solo, it's never, how a lot of free music can be kind of noisy. It sounds like, people go, oh, it's too noisy. It's too weird. It's too This isn't like that. It's everything he does is so musical that it's just always knocks me out when I listen to it. It's and being a part of that, it made it so easy for me to involve myself or to respond to it. Something we used to do at Benedictine. When I started there, we started from the ground up, as I mentioned, and so I, as a vocal jazz group, I was supposed to have an ensemble, but heck, I had like 5 or 6 people at the most, and it wasn't a SATB kind of thing. I couldn't do charts, and by the way, the charts I found in those days I wasn't happy with much I found anyway. So for a while, we were just doing very kind of open-ended improvise. But I would improvise my sessions. Sometimes I wouldn't know when I walked in the door what we were going to do. And because of that, we were situated on the 4th floor of an old administration building, and we shared the floor with the art department. And so the head of the art department had all these paintings, pictures all over the walls of our space. And every now and then I would just grab one, bring it in, and I'd put it on the board and say, okay, we're going to sing this. How do you want to do this? But it was also informed by the fact that, again, I was there in the late 80s, early 90s, and I had, when Vocal Summit did their project in 86, I was all over that and really thought that was really cool stuff. And so we took those apart, we analyzed those, we learned from those, and we were kind of doing that sort of thing, So the idea being that it was very open-ended and experimental, and I missed that because now at North Central, it's a much different environment, and I've got an ensemble that's an ensemble, and I arranged for it because first of all, I enjoy arranging, and second of all, it allows me to tweak the charts from every 4. I've got a set of 4, 4. I can get through 4 years, and then I have to recycle them. But every different group that comes in, 4 years ago, it's a different bunch of people. Either the voicing is different, or they're, the tenor I was writing for is no longer, and I don't have one, and so you're able to tweak them. It's really hard to do with pre-published charts,
Yeah, definitely.
I have a ball with that. I'm never going to make a dime on them, but it's great fun.
By the way, Anita Wardell is joined, and she said hi.
Oh God, Anita, that was such a hit and miss. We were planning, at least at some point, to continue the camp up at Birch Creek, and I approached Anita about doing it, and we were all making our plans about her coming over and getting it done when we said, no, you know what, this isn't going to fly after all. So I never got to work with her, but I want to so much. Hi, Anita. I'd like you could say hi. I don't know why I think I'm going to hear it.
You can message her afterwards. Last night I had a little experience that just reminded me one more time. So my friend Rick Rossi is a sax player, and he's basically had his own kind of school, emanating from him for 17 years. And so he was telling me a month ago that he had really settled on this method of teaching that was really working. He could bring a person, a kid or an adult, from never having picked up the instrument to improvising over a blues in 3 months, and that's actually saying a lot, because that's really not that long. So I thought a few things. First of all, I thought, hey, I could maybe, do this for piano and get my my blah blah mama, as Japan says, piano chops better. and but also I'm always looking for ideas for singers. How can you teach singers these instrumental like things? So we decided that I would take lessons. And last night, I played flute when I was growing up,
Yes.
and I went into Berkeley with flute. So I actually took out the flute, and he had never heard me, and he said, "Oh." He said, you have a tone still, I mean, you can play, you have your fingerings. And he said, "I think we should do it on flute instead of piano."
Ah,
He's not really a pianist, right? So as far as the fingerings go, that's like a whole different thing.
yeah.
So I was telling my husband about it, and I was telling him what the process feels like, and why it's so important to have music, specifically music in education, for all, and why it's just such a sin that they take away funding for it, because it's not just about learning to be a musician. It's about so many other things like focus. How does focus actually feel, and how does determination to get through something feel, and how does it feel to get to the other side and actually accomplish that something that you can be proud of, that people actually go, "Wow, that was nice," all of those things. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but but it just kills me when they take away the money for the arts. It's like, you guys don't friggin' get it. Who are you people who are thinking like that? You must be like robots, to not get it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the years of defunding is really showing in the fact that I think it's had an impact on the American public's musical tastes, certainly, or lack of, um,
Lack
lack,
of.
yeah, well, lack of, I need a word, discernment, of discerning what's good or bad. I mean, if a celebrity tells them it's good, it must be good. There's no
Yeah.
ability to, if you will, think. It's really, really,
Actually, Devin Manson was talking about that yesterday. He said he was just bringing up. I can't. I just remember what he said. I don't remember what encapsulated it, but he said, like some of the pop music that he listens to seems so harmonically seems so dull, basically,
oh
or
God, you're kidding. Just
kind of.
harmonically, no. I talk about um, uh, this is the chord progression of the decade. You ready?
Yeah.
Or its cousin. It starts on the 5 chord. Something like that. I mean, you can come in anywhere you want, but it's just this loop. And I mean, I hear it all the time on like commercials and pop tunes, and it's like there's no. And Al Jarreau's recorded a tune. I wish I remember who wrote it, called Dinosaur. And I was just taken with it because it had a line in there. It's basically saying that a dinosaur, meaning I'm old, I'm old fashioned, meaning the world has gone on and I'm still stuck with, my old values or whatever, but, in a good way.
Right.
And he had this line in there about chromaticism was gone, about the idea that I want chromaticism and it's where is it, and I thought, oh my God, yes, you're speaking to my soul now, my students can't sing a freaking chromatic scale if they had a gun to their head, because they just don't hear that in the music anymore.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is dire, is that we don't hear good music on a day-to-day basis the way even in you and I used to be able to hear, and just took it for granted.
I have a friend in Cyprus named Alexia. Alexia. Oh gosh, I just had her last name. Anyway, Alexia Vas. No wonder I can't pronounce it. Vasula. Sorry, Alexia. Anyway, but she's very well known on that side of the earth, and she created a nonprofit organization that took good music, meaning classical and jazz, and and actually brought it into elementary schools, which plays the elementary schools, like they'll play music on the breaks, like in the hallways, or and what they've been playing in various situations is pop music, right, or kind of unthinking rhythmic stuff. And she has actually succeeded in bringing in classical and jazz for that situation, and it's changing the way people are looking at music and looking at life, and it's really an interesting project that she has.
Yeah.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
Gee, would Jax come out and say hello?
I think so. Hey, Jack, are you home? Hello? Okay, let me see if I can find him. Hold on. Talk amongst yourselves.
Okay, I'll tell you who's coming. Tomorrow I have a day off. I have Thursdays off. Friday, one of the most amazing bass players I've ever heard. He's fascinating. His name is David Pilch, and he's played with lots of people, including K.D. Lang. And with the weekend, we're having a Brazilian weekend. Saturday, fabulous singer Claudia Villela, and Sunday, the most beautiful, lovely singer, arranger, composer, pianist, serious arranger, and Katina De Luna. So that's this weekend. We're having a Brazilian weekend. Jack, you're not in the camera.
No.
Okay, I'm vertical and he's horizontal. How do you like it?
This is a very abstract household.
Hi, Jack.
How are you, my dear?
See, ladies and gentlemen, isn't this a good match? You could just see immediately.
Really, you can just see this was a pair made in heaven, right?
It's good to see you again.
It's good to
It's
see
been
you.
too long.
I like your haircut. Did Janice cut your hair or something?
No, this just comes from not washing my hair for a week, being cooped up in the house.
Oh no, he won't let me touch him with the scissors. It's really a shame because I know I could do a good job, but he won't let me. However, I've taken to my own. I've had to, I was laughing because I said that, I've got, if you're going to do your show, I need to do it as soon as possible because my hair's growing. Pretty soon I won't be presentable at all.
We went in the other day and I said, just cut out the gray ones. And she said, "Do you want to be bald?"
You don't look gray. You look blonde.
Well, it's the light, but no, yeah, the light right now is making your hair look kind of yellow, but it's actually very, it's a beautiful, well, kind of like yours. It's a very gray white kind of pepper. Yeah.
So Jack, we're gonna. Oops. Bonnie King French said hi, Jackie.
She's my cousin
Oh,
in Florida.
cool.
Hi, Bonnie.
Any cousin of Jack's is a cousin of mine. Well, we're gonna do a drum hang. We're just trying to figure out who we
I've got some names for you later.
do. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it. That should be really. I don't know if I can survive a drum hang.
I'm not sure I can either.
Oh, you could just leave. You could just put Jack. Just put Jack in sort of. He'll put him in charge. He'll carry it.
Yeah. Oh. I wouldn't even know what to ask, so maybe I'll have to talk to you before we do that.
We can do that. I'm gonna head back to my cave.
Okay.
Good to see you.
Thank you. You too.
And we need to make some music sometime soon.
That would be fun.
Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah. Really fun.
You take care. Stay safe.
Okay.
Stay healthy.
You too. Isn't he cute, ladies and gentlemen?
Oh dear.
So we have a little. I mean, I don't hard stop at 2, but it's about 7 minutes away from 2, and Is there anything you want to talk about or say to the people before?
Oh, wow. I don't think so. I think um, I think we've covered everything I can think of. I didn't mean to run out of time. I was worried that we wouldn't have enough time, because as you and I know, we can be Gabby when we get together,
It's different with everybody and different in the moments and stuff. It's okay. We're just hanging, It's
Yeah.
their hangs and lots of good information and
I can, just a couple of maybe just how do I say little snippets. I mean, a little. I need a word. That's my problem anymore. I'm getting old, I'm losing my vocabulary and it's driving me nuts. I just can't find them at the time, and then later on, it's like delayed reaction. Um, One was simply that I realized that of all the singers in the world, in other words, the only person that I was really aware of as a young person in terms of impact on me was Nat Cole. That even though at the time he was in the American public's eyes, he was singing, his schmaltzy ballads and so forth. He was, he wasn't doing jazz tunes specifically, but there was nonetheless something about his phrasing that, I mean, at the time I didn't even realize what it was that drew me to him. I just knew, wow, that was an amazing singer, and I was 10 or 11 when I really glommed on to him.
yeah.
And I didn't think about it very much after that until years later. I was watching a PBS show. They have, I'm sure you've seen it. It was an hour and a half thing that they produced, probably American Masters or whatever, about Nat Cole. Mm-hmm. And he's singing, and may have been unforgettable. I don't remember. I was doing the dishes and I'm singing along with him, and I realized, oh my God, we were like in lockstep. In other words, maybe the fact that I just absorbed his, but I mean, the way he phrased was exactly the way I would phrase it, and I realized at that time that he was probably the most important vocal influence on me that was totally unconscious. It wasn't anybody that I was consciously listening to. Oh, I want to be a singer. Let me sing like that.
Yeah.
It was just something that I absorbed. And the other story that was very, not exactly a life changer, but again, kind of fed into this idea of helping me decide how to come at jazz, is that I had an opportunity to work, or to not a work, but to just do a quickie, a concert or an appearance with Clark Terry, where he was playing, I think at Emporia State University, probably at the summer camp Jack was doing. And Jack had played in Clark's band a lot, so they knew each other very, very well. And so Clark had me come up and sing a couple of tunes. And that experience, it went well, and Clark loved me and we got along famously and whatever. But that was when I first realized, oh, so just singing jazz standards in a swing style isn't necessarily going to cut it. That's not really all there is here. I'm going to have to learn because he was expecting me to know the instrumental tunes and to be able to scat sing with him, and so I was like, okay, duly noted. I get it. I'm going to have to get myself better prepared. So just all these little things that happen to you along the way. I'm sure you can think of many, many of those as well, where you've had an encounter with a musician who has said to you or has guided you in terms of, hey, you've got something really great going. Here's what you need to do next, And I also to say that, going back to the idea of vocalists preparing themselves adequately or completely for this. And that is the idea that maybe it doesn't work this more anymore, but in my day, you didn't get gigs from club owners or from the venue. You got gigs because the musicians thought, were hip to you, and they spread the word about you to other people and to contractors. And pretty soon that's how I got into the business. A drummer, Henry Griggs was his name. I was a casual. I was on 3-night casual years and years ago, and one of the first jobs I had of that sort. And he liked me so much, he just started spreading the word about me. And pretty soon the phone started ringing. And so my point was is remains that in order, I think in order to be successful long term, you really do have to have the support of your musicians, of your sidemen, of the people who are playing with you, your band. The instrumental community is very powerful in terms of their ability to support you and help you grow and sort of catapult you forward. And I think if you don't consider that piece, it's going to be a longer struggle, you know.
I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, actually, that's so true. And
I mean, you know, I would always tell people at the camp, assume that you're going to go into this. They're going to assume you know nothing, and you have to prove that you are not just another pretty face with a pretty voice and a microphone in your hand. You know, you need to know how to do this, and you need to speak their language and be able to communicate with them intelligently. And once you do that, it will open up for you. You know. I think, because that I think is more important than if you're a perfectly finished product. You know, it's the idea that they respect you because you've done your homework.
and that's actually part of the package. The other part is once you do that, or even before you do that, that you're part of the community. You know, and so all of that is kind of the, I guess if somebody asked us what the road to success is, you know, that those would be a huge chunk of it. Know your stuff and then become a part of the community.
And be kind to that community. In other
Yeah.
words, you know, be respectful and be kind to the people that you deal with, and be appreciative of what they're giving you. And a little of that goes a long way, and it will repay you in spades if you're that. I think if you're that way, you know, because I know some very talented singers who have everything they should have to get going, you know, to make it happen, and yet just by way of their, you know, their not being considerate with their musicians or whatever, can really, you know, shoot themselves in the foot about, you know, trying to get forward. Boy, can I talk or what?
It's all right. It's quarantine brain. But yeah, just one more thing I wanted to say about that was just to reiterate. I think that what we've gotten today from this conversation with you is a great, of course, you know, I'm a fan of you, but is a great affirmation of how one should live their lives, and that may be musical, and it may be jazz, and it may be improvisation, or it may be driving a truck, or bringing up your children. It's all of these things, and that's why we're so lucky to have music as a teacher for life lessons. But but it's again what I'm affirming and complimenting you on is your whole. It seems like your whole lifetime perspective of moving forward, you know, and of course we all have our, you know, pitfalls along the way, but still you whatever pitfall you had, you got up and you did it again, and you recommitted and you refocused and you went forth bravely and you put yourself into dangerous situations, you know, unknown situations. So, and you are a successful person, you know, and you have a good life, and this is the answer. This is what it's all about. So I applaud you for that.
Oh, well, thank you. That means a lot to me. I really appreciate your words. So sweet.
Yeah.
I try to do it, and you know, and you hit the nail on the head. You have to keep going forward. You know, the idea that, you know, we won't talk age, but I've been on this earth for a while, and yet, you know, I'm not done. I have to continue. There's music, you know, we all know this. Music is like an artichoke, right? You know, it's easy, and then you pull, you know, and then you pull back oh, here's more. You get that done, and then here's more. It's always layers, and we're never done. And so, you know, it's to the end of your life journey, and you have to keep, I think, just keep open-minded about what the future presents and how you're going to deal with it. And again, that takes me back to that idea of flexibility, if not being able to roll with the punches. I mean, look at it now. Life is throwing us a lot of curves, and we're having to figure out how we're going to navigate through this. And I think the more flexible amongst us are going to be going to come out the best in terms of still being, surviving at the end of this.
I agree. And I just want to encourage people along these particular lines to, again, I've just really loved the word curiosity lately because I've been reading Elizabeth Gilbert's book, Big Magic, and she just talks about how curiosity is creativity.
Yes.
And that just really clicked with me.
That's been a word that's come up a lot in my environment as well lately. Is like, that's a big, and
Yeah. So I just want to encourage people to stay curious and notice when you're curious. Like, oh, I'm curious. What am I curious about? This is interesting, and to help move people forward, because it is a little confusing now. I mean, I think people would like to move forward, but they don't know how, maybe they can't imagine. So it's definitely worthwhile to spend some time and imagine stuff, and get curious and use your imagination, Bob Saul said, "Nice to see you again. Great interview."
Bob is has been my longtime piano accompanist at the college.
Oh, cool.
In fact, I hope Bob doesn't mind my saying this. I'm sure he won't, but I've known him since he was like 19. He was a graduate of Benedictine, and he was a student of Jack's and ours in the jazz program, and he played for all of my vocalists.
Oh.
And what I was allowed to do in those days was, at some point, I disbanded my group altogether for a couple of years, and I just took the time and divvied it amongst my private voice lesson people, and they had an extra 30 minutes with him in the room on piano, and I didn't have to play piano, and that was a game changer. I don't know about you, but if I could have a piano person for my lessons, I could get so much more done than me sitting there playing. I don't talk about tracks. I'm talking about just being able to get off the and be able to engage with the singer directly. Well, anyway, he enabled me to do that, but he also learned a lot about about singing and about jazz singing and by being a fly on the wall during these sessions. And so years later, as soon as I was able to hire somebody to accompany at North Central, I called Bob, and so he's been. I think we've forgotten how. I think he said 07, so he might have started the year that you can.
Oh.
Yeah, that's how long he's been working there. Yeah. So, and he's amazing because he reads like a hawk, and he can play great. He can play my charts, almost sight read them. I can't sight read my charts. I can only play two parts at a time. I play like therapy time. To get through my own stuff, and he just snaps through it. So he's really a jewel. So, hi, Bob.
Well, thanks, Janice. I'm sorry I didn't have you sing a little or play something, but everybody go find Janice Borla's and Jack Mouse's music too. And thanks for hanging out.
Listen, this has been wonderful, lots of fun, and I really appreciate your having me on your show. Appreciate it.
Thanks. And everybody, tomorrow I'm on a break, and Friday David Pilch. Ooh. Okay.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Love you all.